I'm Andrew Schwartz, and you're listening to The Truth of the Matter, a podcast by CSIS where we break down the top policy issues of the day and talk with the people that can help us best understand what's really going on. Tom, we're in day 4 of the Israeli-Iranian conflict that's going on right now. How do you see it? Who's winning? Who's losing? What worries you the most?
Yeah, so look, it's been an eventful couple days. We've seen hundreds of ballistic missiles come from Iran. This is easily one of the biggest ballistic missile and ballistic missile defense engagements in history. And it is truly momentous in terms of the overall context and the overall posture that Israel is taking. October 7 changed the world. October 7 changed Israel's posture to the Middle East. We saw that in Gaza. We saw it in spades with Hezbollah. And Israel seems to be taking their Hezbollah playbook to Iran, which is to say the head of the snake. And they're probably right to do so. That is, of course, ultimately the political headstream from which all of these problems and all these proxies have flowed over the years. And the stated reason, as Netanyahu said over the weekend in a speech, is that they have some belief that Iran is significantly closer to nuclear weapons capability. The IAEA has come out and said, no kidding, Iran really does have an ambitious nuclear enterprise here. And I think we ought to take everybody at their word on that front. So multiple U.S. presidents have said over the years that they and the Israeli government will not tolerate nuclear Iran. And now the Israelis are acting apparently unilaterally without the United States on that front. The Trump administration, with Secretary Rubio's statement and various statements by the president, seem to be saying, hey, this isn't our fight. I think that's unfortunate. I think that the Trump administration appears to be signaling a continuation of the Biden administration's, I would say, lack of a killer instinct here. The Iranian regime, in the scheme of things, has never been weaker. They've never been more on the ropes. And yet, nevertheless, they're throwing a lot of stuff at Israel. Israel has air superiority over Iran by, according to press accounts. That's important, but they don't have all the capability they need to hit the bunker busters and to hit the things, hardened and deeply buried targets. So I think this is one of those once-in-a-lifetime opportunities. And it was a triumph or a tragedy as to whether the United States and other friends step up to help Israel end this cancer, to exorcise this cancer that is the Iranian regime.
Tom, when the IAEA said that Iran was about 3 days away from being able to assemble a nuclear warhead, I think it set off alarm bells in Israel that you just couldn't, ignore. The Israelis have thrown a lot of resources at this. Iran has thrown a lot of resources back. Your website, Missile Threat, which is one of the real authoritative sites in the world on who has what in their arsenal, you indicate that Iran has the largest ballistic missile arsenal in the Mideast. How much of it have they used? How much of it can they still use against Israel?
Yeah, look, Iran has a lot of missiles, and they've used some hundreds over the past 4 days against Israel. But I would not be too sanguine. I suspect that they probably have a lot more. The limiting factor is not so much the number of missiles. It's probably A, the number of launchers, B, their ability to accurately target various objects on the ground, 3, the command and control, because they keep whacking to their success. They keep whacking the command and control elements, which is, look, when you go after the kill chain, you don't just play catch, you go after the weak vulnerabilities. And so the Israelis are exactly right. That is how you do it. That's how they proved it with the Hezbollah folks. You don't just wait for the 100,000 rockets to come in. You stem the rocket forces in the bud. So the Iranians have a lot left, and so we can't be too confident. But I'll say there's another limiting factor, and that is the number of missile defense interceptors. And this is, of all the things, while I worry about the Trump administration not having the right killer instinct here, that they seem to be just far too restrained, I also worry about the approach to just sitting and playing catch, which is an overly defensive posture. I criticize the Biden administration for the last couple of years for sitting and playing catch in the Red Sea and for sitting and playing catch with the attacks on Israel, as opposed to taking the offensive operations to hitting things on the ground and ending the threat by other means. The purpose of missile defense is not to simply defend. The purpose of missile defense is to defend long enough to end the threat by other means. Missile defenses buy you time. They buy policymakers and decision makers time. What they don't do is they do not guarantee that policymakers and decision makers will make good decisions and carry through with them in an expeditious way. And that's why time is of the essence here. And this is why the Israelis are flying back and forth these sorties to Iran to try to bomb anything they can. They need help and they need time. And I think it's in our interest to help them out.
Is time running out for the Israelis in terms of their missile defense with Iron Dome, David Sling, Arrow, these advanced technologies that so far have kept Israel relatively safe? Yet we're seeing, some really pretty serious damage in central Israel. And then there's, places that we're not seeing that are being damaged in Israel too. Can you tell me about that? And is Israel, I guess the fundamental question is Israel going to reach a point where they can't defend themselves through missile defense anymore?
Well, look, the Israelis, to their credit, don't talk about numbers of interceptors left. We don't either. That's appropriate. You can kind of look at the budget books and make some surmises about what might be available at any given time from any given launchers and this kind of thing. The answer is usually fewer than you think. And so this is why I stress the worry on this front. Israel's been preparing for this for a long time, of course, to their credit. And to be clear, you described, Andrew, their multiple layer, Iron Dome, David Sling, Arrow, etc., Arrow 2, Arrow 3. But it's really just a handful of systems that are capable of dealing with these relatively longer range exoatmospheric ballistic missiles. And that really comes down to the Arrow 2, which is blast frag, the Arrow 3, which is exoatmospheric hit to kill. And then the United States has, for some number of months recently, had not one but two now THAAD batteries operated by U.S. soldiers in Israel for the defense of Israel that, from press reports, they've been busy. They've been busy shooting stuff down. Then in addition to that, we've got Aegis ships in the Red Sea, most notably the Standard Missile 3. That also is an exoatmospheric hit-to-kill killer. But basically, that's what you got. You got your arrows, you got your THAADs, and you got your SMs, your standard missiles. For the longer range stuff, you can't shoot it down with the Iron Domes and that kind of thing. So when you hundreds of things coming in, I get antsy. I know our friends are getting antsy about numbers.
Tom, what about missiles coming from other areas? Yemen, some people worry that Hezbollah is going to resume their attacks on Israel, possibly even some stuff coming from Hamas in the south.
Yeah. Well, look, I've never been accused of being too optimistic about these kinds of things, but I'll say that there's some silver linings here. And one, that the drubbing, to use a technical term, that Israel has given Hezbollah over the past years apparently led them to say, hey, we're going to stand down. Sorry, Iran, you've been supporting us for decades, but we just got our behinds handed to us, and we're going to sit this one out. I hope that stays. And then likewise, Hamas they're still there. They're still there. They're still very bad guys, but they've taken a very significant drubbing as well. And so the Houthis, however, they've still got a lot. And to be clear, that's the third H proxy group that the Iranians have kind of stood up over the years. And so that's a significant problem. The Houthis, the Yemen-based contingent of the Iranian proxies, had a very significant role, had a significant role in the April 14 attacks, for instance, last year. So I would continue to watch that space to be sure. Here again, the lesson is don't sit around and wait for them to just play catch. You got to get them. You got to get them on the ground, and you got to change their political calculus. I talk about this all the time in terms of why we have to care about homeland missile defense, because we need to worry about the Russians and the Chinese striking us at home to change our political calculus in an away game. And so that's how you got to think of it. We got to change their political calculus. We got to make them wake up tomorrow or not wake up tomorrow and think this is not the day to continue.
As we discussed a minute ago, Israel has exerted some air superiority over Iran right now, and they have full cover is what we're seeing in news reports. But yet it doesn't seem like Israel's necessarily winning. Do you see anybody right now winning? And the second part of this question is what exactly is Israel targeting in Iran? They don't seem to be targeting civilian areas. They're trying to avoid that. In fact, they're telling people to evacuate before they launch an attack. Conversely, it certainly seems that some of the Iranian attacks are going directly at Israeli civilians. What do you make of all this?
So I would say, first of all, the Israelis are remarkably careful, and they've been remarkably careful to not go after the civilian targets. And I think actually they're doing a pretty good job on the public messaging piece of that, in terms of communicating that, in terms of the PR side of it, to their credit. I will say, however, that both sides are in it to win it. They're both sides in it to go after military and infrastructure targets, probably more than meets the eye. So my impression is, again, based on reporting, which could be wrong, that actually, yes, there's a lot of stuff going after indiscriminately Tel Aviv and civilian targets in Israel, but there's actually a decent number that are going after military bases in Israel and infrastructure as well. And so, to the extent that the Iranian missiles are capable of the precision guidance that they have been honing over the past number of years, I think both sides are coming at this in a focusing on military effectiveness and degrading military capability. But nevertheless, Andrew, I do believe that right now the Israelis are winning it. Witness again their air superiority. And I think here's the thing: you can have air superiority. It doesn't necessarily mean that you keep the missiles from launching in Iran. And the reason is you don't have ground superiority, right? And you don't necessarily have the capability to be in exactly the right place at the right time to have boost phase intercept capability. You can be buzzing around a place that's twice the size of Texas, but not necessarily have a fighter with guns or an air-to-air missile that is fortuitously right there when a ballistic missile launches. And so this is why degrading the command structure and degrading the authorizing structure and all these kinds of things are so important. And look, the Israelis are not going to be occupying the missile tunnels, right? That seems highly unlikely. And so it is a tough challenge.
What can Israel do to bring the Iranians back to the table? Is there much more they can do, or are they sort of stuck hovering over their airspace trying to pick off what they can at this point?
I think the question is, what table are we talking about? There's the dinner table, there's the negotiating table, and there's the mortician's table.
I was hoping it would be the negotiations table.
I think that ship might have sailed. I don't think we're going to be seeing just a whole lot of negotiations just in the near term. And so right now, folks are negotiating through action, and they're negotiating to try to get to a position of strength, maybe in the coming days or weeks or however long. But I don't think either side necessarily wants to sit down. They don't want to pause long enough to sit down. Right now, both trying to get an upper hand to shape the position in which they might consider doing that.
And what does Israel need to actually do with the airstrikes they're doing right now? I mean, they're trying to take out piece by piece, as you said, the Iranian command. Is it possible to actually get at all of these launch sites, or do you really, like you said before, do you need to have people on the ground to be able to do that?
Look, would that it were, but it's a very difficult enterprise. Scud hunting of one kind or another has, for the past 30, 35 years, been a very difficult enterprise, and it still is. The hiding and finding dynamic is always a tough one. And the Iranians have been very enterprising at building, again, these underground tunnels. They've been learning from the North Koreans. They probably had help from the North Koreans. Underground tunnels where you don't know where the missiles, they've shown videos of this, and by the way, this is kind of a version of the old peacekeeper racetrack concept from the 1980s, is you got missiles driving around underground, and they can kind of pop up on any spot in the racetrack to launch. That makes it hard to target them in advance because they've got the uncertainty principle on their side. So it's tough. They're not going to find every missile on the ground. They're not going to intercept every missile, unfortunately. And what they need to do is convince the decision makers that it's not in their interest to keep going.
Tom, what indicators would you look to suggest Iran is preparing a larger attack on Israel, or Israel's preparing a larger attack on Iran?
Well, I wouldn't be surprised if Israel wasn't doing their very darndest on a day-to-day basis. They're probably limited by the number of jets and pilot sleep hours and munitions and tankers to be, again, supporting these sorties back and forth. And it takes a little while to fly from Israel to Iran, after all. I think the interesting is, do they go after Khamenei? Do they go after some other senior leadership? How does that potentially slow things down, cause folks to pause? I worry about the Russian angle here in terms of them leaning on Iran or trying to intervene with Iran in the way, frankly, that they did with Assad in Syria. And remember, they played a game there. They were trying to stay involved in Syria at the tail end of that thing, and this could go one way or the other. If there's somebody that comes in after the mullahs, it could be a Russian-friendly regime, Russian curious regime. Or it could be something entirely different. I don't think the Israelis care that much about whether it is a democratic Iran or Republican Iran, this kind of thing. The three criteria are: have you degraded the nuclear facilities sufficiently, so this is not a going concern? And two, have you changed the regime sufficiently so that it is A, not the current mullahs, and B, not a Russian-aligned entity?
So, Tom, I wanted to ask you also, Israel has been bombing Iran from the air using F-35s, there are other kinds of planes, F-16s, F-15s. But Israel also has its own missile arsenal that they can launch from their country to Iran. They've yet to do that. Why is that? Is it more expensive to do that? Is it less precise?
Well, it's probably not necessary, and does have the risk of being less precise. And of course, a number of those are, of course, more on their strategic side, and we certainly hope it doesn't go anywhere near their nuclear capabilities. And so the fact that they've established air superiority so quickly, and again, after April 14, after October, they signaled. I mean, look, the Biden administration asked them to take it on the chin. They took it on the chin. The Biden administration asked them to take the win after April 14, when they caught and we together intercepted so many different incoming objects. They took the win at the expense, of course, of a lot of missile defense interceptors. I said at the time, I worried that that was a bad precedent, and I think the continuation of this has proven that to be correct. So the fact that nevertheless, if they have air superiority, that is a preferred enterprise. You can kind of control your shots more precisely, perhaps, than you can with the long-range standoff missiles. So I don't think they necessarily need to go that direction. What I think they probably need is support on the aircraft-delivered missiles or the aircraft-delivered bombs. And frankly, they probably need bigger bombs. They need those bunker busters to get the deeply buried stuff.
Tom, I really appreciate it. And I have a feeling you and I will be talking about this in the weeks to come. So thanks for this insight. Really, really helpful in understanding this conflict.
Good stuff, Andrew. Always a pleasure.
If you enjoyed this podcast, check out our larger suite of CSIS podcasts. From Into Africa, The Asia Chessboard, China Power, AIDS 2020, The Trade Guys, Smart Women, Smart Power, and more. You can listen to them all on major streaming platforms like iTunes and Spotify. Visit csis.org/podcasts to see our full catalog.